there any further speakers?
Mr Speaker.
Claire Curran.
Speaker, I'd like to acknowledge the work of the Minister for Regulatory Reform, the Honourable Rodney Hyde, who has graciously acknowledged several times during the passage of this bill the work of my colleague, the former Minister.
Just say to members, that was a bit my mistake, but there is quite a lot of noise in the House. It's very distracting. So I know we're getting close to the end of a long week, so I could just ask for a little less noise and invite Claire Curran to continue.
Mr Speaker, I'll acknowledge the Minister for Regulatory Reform again, the Honourable Rodney Hyde, who has graciously acknowledged several times during the passage of this bill today the work of my colleague, the former Minister, the Honourable Leanne Dalzell. I'd also like to acknowledge the Honourable Leanne Dalzell both for her extensive work in bringing this bill to the House and for the work that underpinned it, and also her work as the Chair of the Commerce Committee. The Honourable Leanne Dalzell has been rightly acknowledged in this House many times today, and I'm not proposing to beat the record set by my colleague, the Honourable David Parker. This bill is important if we are to have an efficient regulatory environment which is fair to businesses. And I'd like to conclude, I'd like to remind the House that there is no reason to push this bill through under urgency, but also say that this haste is beginning to define the National Act government's approach to lawmaking, which is no consultation. It's also important to remember that it was a Labor government who came up with these changes, not a National one, although National is doing the right thing by continuing with this bill. And it makes small, uncontroversial but important changes to the regulatory environment. It's built on the foundation of the Honourable Leanne Dalzell's extensive consultation with business, and Labor is thankful that this consultation was undertaken while Labor was in government, as it's obvious that this is not how a National Act government intends to operate. This bill is a response to businesses' opinions heard by Labor on what would make the regulatory environment easier for them to operate in. And this came from the wide consultation process that the Labor government underwent via the Quality Regulation Review, which involved 200 businesses and was led by my colleague, the Honourable Leanne Dalzell. This review also greatly enhanced the regulatory impact statement regime, of which Labor is very proud, and was also led by my colleague, the Honourable Leanne Dalzell. Again, the Quality Regulation Review was announced by the Labor government in May 2006 to ensure that New Zealand's regulatory environment was supportive of the government's economic transformation agenda, which was to address regulatory barriers to business growth. And that review investigated ways of eliminating duplication and inconsistencies and uncertainties where multiple regulatory frameworks intersect, and looked at improving government's own processes for assessing and monitoring the impact of regulations. And we often look at how one regulation works across the economy, but we seldom look at the cumulative impact of all regulation on one sector or industry. And the fact that Labor looked at both angles has developed a richer perspective on the impacts on business and a better understanding of how we can best resolve any concerns. Many of the ongoing work programs that have been established as a result of the review are addressing these interface issues. Because the Labor government talked directly to business, we were able to get very specific feedback about how regulation looks from their viewpoint, and have been able to build their needs into the strengthened regulatory impact analysis regime. And this bill confirms that New Zealand's regulatory environment is in good shape, which fits with the World Bank's assessment of New Zealand as second in the world for ease of doing business. But there is room to improve the way that rules are communicated to business and implemented and enforced. Getting regulation right is a matter of continuous improvement. I think the Minister acknowledged that earlier today, and Labor supports the intention to have annual regulatory improvement bills. Labor supports business, but it's more than that. Labor listens to business. Unlike the National Government, Labor did not rush their end of the bill, namely the groundwork, the consultation and the creation of the foundation on which this bill now stands. And the National Party is not the only party which stands for and supports Kiwi businesses. After 9 years of Labor government, New Zealand was one of the easiest places to do in the world to do business, and this bill demonstrated the enormous benefit that real listening can provide, asking businesses what they really thought. And it's the cumulative effect of making small changes on a number of what seem to be small issues that can add up to significant change. So this afternoon, as we commend this bill and its amendments to the 9 acts it affects, we should remember that it was Labor who listened to businesses, and it was Labor who came up with legislation to support them and foster their growth. And there can be no justification for bringing this bill through all its final stages under urgency, but because we originated the measure and because it's good law, we will not oppose its passage.
Mr. Speaker.
Order. I've been advised by the Labor whips that they intend to split the call, and the second part of the call goes to Raymond Hall.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm delighted to rise to take another call, a very short 1.5 minutes call.